learning goal of this lesson is to develop understanding of the context that underpin the composition of Night Letters and consider the intended audience and the purpose of the text. Robert Dessaix began writing Night Letters in 1994, 6 months after he was diagnosed with HIV. There are clear connections between the author, Robert Dessaix, and the narrator of Night Letters, R. Illness is central to their respective lives. We suspect that R, like Dessaix, has been diagnosed with HIV, yet R's actual illness is never named. In the novel, R simply explains to his partner, Peter, what the doctor has told him. He says, "I've got it." Robert and R also share a variety of other similarities. They're both homosexual Australian men, and they both have a partner named Peter. Although R could be short for Robert, it's important to separate the narrator from the author. The text isn't a memoir, and Dessaix explains how he constructed the novel in a speech he gave in Lyon in 2007. I threw in Dante's Divine Comedy, Casanova, Lawrence Stern, Marco Polo, as well as characters I'd never met on my actual journey. An Indian poet, a German professor, an Italian writer called Emilio. I telescoped time. I told parts of the story back to front, created arabesques and spirals where in reality there had been straight lines, concocted fantastic stories, in order to make the truth of what I was writing seem truer. So what truth was Dessaix trying to make seem truer? There is no greater truth than the fact that we will all die one day. In his own life, Dessaix had abruptly become aware of his own mortality and impending death. In Australia in the 1980s and 90s, HIV was connected to illness, fear and death. A 1987 advertising campaign encapsulated the fear that the disease inspired at the time.
At first, only gays and IV drug users were being killed by AIDS. But now we know every one of us could be devastated by it. The fact is, over 50,000 men, women and children now carry the AIDS virus. That in 3 years, nearly 2,000 of us will be dead. That if not stopped, it could kill more Australians than World War II. But AIDS can be stopped, and you can help stop it. If you have sex, have just one safe partner, or always use condoms. Always.
However, Dessaix doesn't make the novel about the illness. Instead, R's diagnosis is the catalyst for his exploration of hope, God, happiness, bliss, mortality, desire, love, beauty, and the surprises the world offers us each day. Dessaix also doesn't focus on R's sexuality. Having a homosexual protagonist in the 90s was less common than it is today. Indeed, homophobia is conspicuously absent in Night Letters. Dessaix chooses not to represent Australia as a homophobic society. The conflict in the novel tends to be internal rather than external. However, Australian society was, and arguably still is, endemically homophobic. The fact that homosexuality remained illegal in Tasmania until 1997, 3 years after Dessaix had written Night Letters, illustrates this fact. In New South Wales, the 1982 Anti-Discrimination Amendment Act made it illegal to discriminate against homosexuals, yet homosexuality itself wasn't legalised until 1984, meaning that for 2 years there was the curious situation where homosexuality was not grounds for dismissal, but it was for imprisonment. Like homophobia, illness is also absent in Night Letters. In Dessaix's Lyon speech, he says, "In my account of a man coming to terms with a death sentence, as it was at that time, there is no description of physical suffering, no discussion of treatments, in fact, very little description of the narrator's body at all." Although illness is deliberately absent in Night Letters, it was the catalyst for Dessaix writing the novel. Dessaix explained his purpose in writing the novel in an interview on 1+1. Night Letters, The book I wrote about the diagnosis is really the account of my trying to turn what happened to me into something beautiful. This suggests that Dessaix wrote the book for himself, and for him, it's a novel of catharsis, converting this breakage into something life-affirming. I believe that developing your understanding of context, audience, and purpose helps you to understand the composer's choices about language, form, and structure. For Year 12 students, I'd recommend that you have a prepared essay for your HSC exam, which is very different from a prepared essay. In the essay structure that I recommend, the information provided in this video would fit in paragraph 2, where you discuss concepts. Obviously, this paragraph will need to prove your thesis statement and answer the question. And that's it, you've made it. To recap the main points of the lesson, I analysed the context, audience, and purpose of Night Letters. This included some personal context for Robert Dessaix and social, historical, cultural, and political context for Australia in the 1980s and 90s. In particular, I focused on the absences of illness and homophobia in the text. I urge you to also consider how your own context affects your reading of Night Letters. In regards to the purpose and the intended audience of the text, Dessaix wrote Night Letters for personal reasons, transforming personal tragedy into something beautiful. So as the orchestra music begins to play, the final thing for me to do is to wish Year 12 students all the best with their studies and exams. Thank you so much for watching.